Welcome to the book podcast, episode 2. Episode 1, you guys helped us pick a book to read. And episode 2, now we are going to discuss the first 8 chapters of the Resemblance.
Part 1.
So, part 1. So, I want you guys, we're both going to do it, but I want all of us to say our, out of 10 stars where you're at so far with the book. So, I'm going to start. I'm at like a 5 out of 10 stars. I'm enjoying it, but it's not an all-time favorite. I feel like there's a lot to discuss, though. Go ahead.
Wow, we can just start like that?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe a 5 out of 10. It ended, maybe the last part of the last chapter was an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
So it starts to get exciting. And that might be different at the last part of the book. Like my overall rating might go up, but 5 sounds good. Mm-hmm. It's been a slow burn. Mm-hmm. No pun intended.
Yeah. Go, Jackson.
It's out of 10?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I feel like the characters are pretty well written and stuff, but I just don't like the main character very much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess I don't relate to her very well because she's a detective and I'm a teenage boy. But I guess that's the point of reading books, is to see a new perspective or something like that. So I'd probably give it a 4 out of 10. But we'll see how it goes.
That's how I'm feeling right now. Like, I'm not loving it, but I'm not hating it. I'm ready to keep going with part 2 and see what happens. But I'm not feeling this I just love this book.
Yeah.
But I will say where it ended, I felt like you, Mark. I felt ready to pick it up. Mm-hmm. I've been anxious the last few days
to get the next section.
See what's going on.
So a little background on the author. This is, I don't know exactly how many. I think she's written maybe 5 or 6 or 7 books, and this is the first one that's made it through. So, for her, I think that's exciting to have a book be published. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of similarities between her and the main character. She, I think, was a German literature major and taught as a professor at a university. So she has kind of that element of background that relates to the main character, which we'll probably get into.
Yeah.
But good for her. I think it's cool to have a book come out, and it's been, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good. I think.
What's her name?
Good rating.
What's the...
Lauren Nosset.
Mm-hmm.
Nossett. I might be saying that wrong.
Nosset or knows it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I actually, it takes guts and tons of time and effort to write a book. So
yeah, and have this be one of many that she's written that haven't worked, but to still
keep going.
Right.
Yeah, it's cool.
She's had others come out since.
Okay, well, let's jump right in.
Yeah, we should.
We have our main character. I would say the woman detective, wouldn't you say? Marlet. And she is visiting with her mom at the beginning of the book. Her mom's a professor at the university, and she hears commotion, right? So she goes running out, and in the street, there's Jay. Jay, what's his last name? I can't think of his name right now. Jay Kemp. And he's been hit by a car, and the car's not on the scene anymore, and kids are kind of freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
It's on a college campus. You can imagine it's a busy time of day, and they've seen this hit and run take place. And it's at a crosswalk. So from there, she realizes she wants to have this be her case. She's a detective. So she's anxious to have this one be hers because she's usually put on cases. She feels like her boss likes to keep her on the safer cases.
Yeah, the lieutenant is a little bit protective of her. Mm-hmm. Truman is his name, and I think she senses some sort of bias against her, maybe because of his overprotection or because she's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe...
Okay, so it really might be, but there's also something kind of sweet about that he looks at her like a daughter, and that he wants to take care of her. I can see how it would be maybe frustrating if you're wanting to get on some of those more high profile cases, but it's also really sweet when you think of that relationship of him being like, I love you so much, I want to keep you safe.
Yeah. And there are a couple things that sort of point to him as maybe culpable in this whole activity. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I agree. Like, at first blush, he seems like just a caring man.
Yeah.
And for a feminist, I could see that could be frustrating because to her, it's like he is not seeing her potential and he has to take on this male model of protection and stifles her in the process.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good idea. Let's just, what do you think if we just kind of give a good summary of the book, like quick, of where we are to this point?
Yeah.
And then go back and kind of break out some details, or do you want to do it one step at a time?
That sounds good. Let's just skim over the whole book.
Okay, I'm going to try and go really quick.
Okay, do it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So the boy dies. His name is Jay Kemp. The driver of the car is witnessed by one of the witnesses on the scene to be another person that looks just like Jay Kemp and is happy as he drives off from the scene of the crime. The detectives, this case eventually is given to Marlet and Teddy, which is her partner, another partner detective. And the two of them kind of go through the normal suspects and try and figure out who it is. So they talk to professors. Jay's found out to be a member of a fraternity, Kappa Phi Omicron, so they go and talk to the boys there. Find out a couple of the main players there at that fraternity. There's also a sorority that's somehow involved, so they go and talk to the group of the sorority. We find out that Marlet, I think, is a little Greek culture, anti-Greek culture. She just doesn't like that part of college life and sees a lot of downsides. And so there's you sense her bias towards the Greek culture, and maybe rightfully so. And then we go on to meet one of his only roommate, and he's off-site with a girlfriend, because he doesn't like some of the things that are going on at the fraternity. They go to meet one of the girls at the sorority, which is a Kappa O, what do they call her? Kappa O dream girl.
Yeah, she's the dream girl.
So she's like the poster girl for their sorority, or their fraternity. Oh, I'm trying to go quickly. And then there's a couple of characters at the fraternity that are suspicious. One in particular is Michael Williams. The writing's sort of taking us to a point where he seems to be the most likely culprit for this, as he's real protective of, he's real arrogant and protective of his status, and he's not willing to participate, and the son of the president of the university. So kind of a hard character to get to if he ends up being guilty. And that's it. Is that a quick summary?
Yeah, I'd say the only part I would talk about is the fact that she does bring multiple people in for interviews in the actual police station. And it does end. Should we bring up the cliffhanger right now? So it does. She brings them in, Michael and Tripp, and interviews them. Tripp is the president of the fraternity house, and Michael is not the president. I think he's the treasurer. I think he's in charge of the money. But his dad, like you mentioned, is the president of the university, has a lot of power, brings them both in. And in that process, Michael is kind of pretty arrogant. Tripp, they do have some kind of strange evidence against him that makes it feel like he could be guilty of something or is holding something back, not quite being truthful. And on Michael's way out, he looks at Marla and says, like, basically, watch your back. And then right at the end, we see her. She's asleep in her bed. She wakes up and there's a fire in her room, and she's screaming in German. And then end scene. That's where we ended. So I'd say that's all of it, though.
Yeah, and that's what elevates it right at the end. That's when the action starts to happen. And what would cause whoever is guilty to try and stop this case, which I'm guessing is what's happening, by threatening and tempting the murder of the main detective in this case. So there's some sort of cover up. I think it's more than just the hit and run, which in most cases are accidental. This sounds like maybe an intentional hit and run, but has some bigger cover up. And let's see if we can kind of tease out what we think might be.
Yeah, I feel like they're pointing to Michael almost too much. Like he's the one that the book's making you feel like he's guilty. So in my mind, I'm like, it's not really going to be him. He's acting weird. He's arrogant. He's like, I'm not going to get like caught in the middle of the crosshairs of this, but I feel like it's too pointed at him that it's not really him.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that's a little bit suspicious is in interviewing each of the members of the fraternity and even Katie at the sorority, there seems to be this like cloud of protection against Michael. Like they won't speak ill of Michael. And we do see that Michael has kind of a dark past. There was one point. Maybe we should back up and talk a little bit about her partner, Teddy. So Teddy just seems like such a nice guy. Like he's calm and he goes into situations that are frantic. And he has this ability to just calm the witness down, get at their level, and make them sort of share because of their trust and respect for him. She describes him as a black man, but I don't know, is there any other physical descriptors? Kind of a bigger, stronger guy, but gets angry when he gets hungry, which I can relate to. Like you don't get much about his character except for in the process of his interactions with witnesses. He just seems to be able to just take away it.
Puts people at ease.
Puts people at ease. Yeah. And so, how did I get to Teddy? Well,
you got there.
So Teddy, I think, like if I were to pick, we won't go there now. So we're still on Michael.
It's okay.
If I were to pick like the character that I relate most to, it's probably Teddy, because like he's this detective that has this. I like to read detective books where the detective has this magic power, like Sherlock Holmes has his power of deduction, or maybe someone has this power of like reading people. And in some ways, Marlette, you learn about her personal life, like her desk at work is haphazard and she's alone at home. Like she's just a little bit of a mess and she's very judgmental. Like everywhere she goes, like she'll read the character, and maybe rightfully so, but she gets to be like super judgmental. So you're sort of like, where's your superpower? Where's your like, when is this detective power going to come out? And, so far it hasn't, except for maybe her power is that she is so against this Greek culture and there's probably going to be some element of that in this, that she's able to find that as a culprit. But what if it wasn't? And then this bias, that could potentially take her away from the truth of the case. Yeah. Where I think Teddy just does that. Like he just talks to the people and gets the facts and figures things out. Yeah.
I think it's interesting how I feel like her like superpower thing, or quote unquote superpower, is how she's just like, oh, this doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? Which is weird, because whenever I think of a detective, I think of like factuality and like using intelligent situations to back her up. Like a lot of her stuff has been emotionally biased, partially towards her history with frat houses and her buddy who was in a frat house, Greg. When I was listening to the audiobook, I kept thinking she was saying Greg, and I was like, I don't think it was Greg.
Yeah, it was Craig.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree, and you can get the sense that she is about feeling. Like she even describes how she kind of tries to get in the victim's shoes. Yeah, and pictures how he would act walking through the fraternity house, or like how it would feel to be. He would kind of take the stairs by threes, or I can't remember what she said, but she was talking about his feel, or like I just don't get the feel. Or she walked in his fraternity room and she was like, it just feels off in here, like too clean. So I do think she has some natural instincts toward being a detective, but they're more of a feeling she gets.
And I get that in other detective books too, where they have just this gut feeling, like there's just this gnawing sensation that so-and-so is bad or so-and-so is involved. And maybe that's why the two of them are a great combo, because Teddy just kind of quietly and methodically draws out the facts that support whatever feeling or gut feeling that she has. But you're right, like that, maybe that is her superpower. As I think about it, she's able to kind of soak into the character and understand what they're thinking, because she, on her own time, she'll be in the process of doing some sort of other investigative work, and you, as the narrator, you read her mind and see the things she's thinking of, and it's like that, putting herself in the place of one of the boys at the fraternity house or the girls at the sorority house.
Yeah.
So I think we need to talk about a couple more characters. So we have good character development on Teddy. Marlet, I think we have pretty good. Is there anyone else you want to?
Well, I feel like, Jackson, why don't you talk about Craig and what happened to him, and so that people can understand her bias toward fraternities.
So Craig was friends with the main character Marlet through basically, I think, what was described as their whole growing up life. And she did not want to go to college, and he was like, "Oh, I got it! Like, we got to go to college." And da da da. Both of their parents are professors, and they clicked because of that, because they found connection through, I think, both being only childs and also both feeling like they had a lot of expectations placed upon them by having two very, very smart parents as professors. And so they kind of bonded over that. Her and Craig eventually pushes her to go to college, and so they both go to college together. Craig joins a frat house and it kind of becomes distant with her until, kind of out of the blue, he just shows up at her house. He's like kind of a mess. He's falling apart, like sobbing, like, "Oh, like, can I just stay here for the night?" Da, 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 da. And so he does, leaves the next morning, and she doesn't hear from him for like a month.
Yeah.
Finally, when she sees him again, he's like, "Oh, nothing, like, I don't know, what are you talking about? Like, nothing weird happened." And he's hanging out with his frat bros, and she kind of feels like this dude is like changed because of a frat house, and how such a good close friend of hers can become so distant because of people like this, which is a lot of where her bias towards frat houses comes from, along with incidents that she's heard of in the past.
Yeah. I know. I thought it was interesting, too, that part where she talks about kind of the statistics of frat houses. I should have had it turned there before I started talking. But I think it's interesting because she lists all the bad things. And then she says, on the flip side, though, if you were to talk to Teddy, her partner, which we talked about already, he would be like, no, like, these are so great because it helps kids with connections, and it helps kids with jobs in the future, or I can't remember all the things. I should have had it pulled up, but do you remember what I'm talking about, where she has that bias, the negative bias, but he kind of has the take of like, here it is. So it's talking about fraternities and Greek life at large, and she's saying like she just wishes they'd do away with the whole thing. We understand better why, because of Craig, her best friend. She feels like she totally lost him. She never talked to him again after that point, when he basically ignored her and acted like she was crazy in front of his fraternity brothers. And then, it was Oliver. Remind me who Oliver was.
Oliver is also at the police station, and there's Marlet and then Teddy, and they work together. And Oliver's the other guy that's kind of like a gunner. He's always trying to get these good positions. And a lot of times Truman, who's a lieutenant, will give a case to Oliver because he's really organized, and maybe he's buddy with the guy clique or whatever. But Oliver gets a lot of stuff that.
So she feels like they're like cesspools, and that they're just underage drinking, sexual assault, like nothing good's happening in a fraternity. Whereas like if you talk to Oliver, and this is a quote, I'll just read directly from the book. It says, Oliver insists that not all fraternities are bad. One of his brothers was a fraternity president, and that charity work and networking form valuable opportunities for young men. And then inevitably, he'll cite higher retention of graduation rates, a strong affinity with their college volunteer work, the amazing benefits of Greek life. So we see that she has definitely this feeling of like, don't be a part of it, where he's like, gosh, they're really great things. So I think there is kind of this fine line in Greek culture. I wasn't a part of a fraternity or a sorority, and you weren't either. So it's not like we have experience where we can talk about exactly like, no, it's not like that, or yes, it has this. But I do kind of feel like the statistics out there, as I kind of Googled and searched, show that it's pretty much described right there as it is. Like, there are definitely problems, but there are also definitely great things that come of them. And if you're going to join a sorority or a fraternity, like, do your research, because some are safer than others. And they had kind of a push, and I don't know if you remember this, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so to really clean up fraternities and sororities and stop the hazing and get rid of that stuff. And they say that it's like 50-50. Like a lot of it now is still taking place, but it's more quiet and it's not so nationally broadcast. But there are, I can't remember what the stat was and I looked it up, but there are still deaths every year because of hazing. And
sexual assault.
Yes. And a lot of those cases aren't reported until later, even in life, which is sad. So there are downsides, but I also looked up and it saw that it was 76% of Congress members, like if you're in the House or the Senate or a part of government, were members of fraternities or sororities.
Whoa,
Isn't that
that's crazy. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Fortune 500 companies, I want to say, I wish I had the stat memorized like I had that one, but I think it was 80% of those were fraternities or sorority members. And so your connections really help you if you've been a part of them.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I know it's kind of crazy when you think that they have that kind of connection and then it leads to something like that. So,
yeah, I think it's definitely a mixed bag. And the idea that you have these connections is good, but maybe that's also part of the negative side of it that people might see is that like only those in the group, in the in-group are benefiting. I can't imagine a way that there's not going to be an in-group and an out-group. That just seems like that's going to be the case for all of history. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if most of the schools, I don't know if I'd ever encourage our kids to be part of one or not. I just don't know.
Would you ever want to be part of one, Jackson?
Yeah, I want to be a frat, bro.
Yeah. Well, and you say that, but when you hear frat bro, I automatically get this image of like parties and drinking and girls and all that stuff, right?
I get an image of, I don't know, hanging out with the boys.
With the boys and doing boy things, right?
Yeah, and just hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
Just having a nice group of guys around you, which I think is the onlook of positivity of frat houses, but there's obviously more there than that.
Downsides too.
Yeah. And I don't think every fraternity is all about, I know a few people that were in sororities. I don't know about fraternities, but they had a great college experience and they still are really connected to those people and they didn't have the hazing or any of the bad experiences. So there's definitely there's definitely people that go through it and just really enjoy their time. I don't know if you guys have watched it's TikTok mostly, these viral videos of, I think it's Alabama, but it's called Bama Rush.
You told me about this. Yeah.
And it's these girls that'll get on and it's during rush week. So when they're trying to pick which sorority they're going for, all of that. And they'll get on TikTok and they'll just go through their outfits. So they'll be like, today I'm wearing this bracelet. It's and it's like $200. And it'll like somebody's taken and then like broken down the price, or they will break down the price and they'll be like, and then my shoes are Coach and my shirt is vintage from wherever and my skirt is, and by the time they're done with their outfits for like one day of rush, it can be anywhere from like $5,000 to $10,000
oh my gosh.
for one outfit. But people are obsessed with it because it's so outrageous and so different, I think. Or you either know the culture and so it's interesting because you're like, oh yeah, I know this, or to me it's this subculture that I know nothing about. So it's fascinating to me to see these girls going through rush week. So it's just kind of this crazy little thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think as far as Marlette's concerned, she's kind of grown up. This is her, I guess her social club outside of home. Her mom was here, so she'd always come to the school with her mom. Her dad was overprotective. We learn about that through the book. And so I don't know that she went out much. So she just kind of came on campus. But she saw the good and the bad early in campus life. And part of that was like money, old money, kind of making decisions without any care or consideration for other people. And you talk about like a $10,000 outfit, that's a ton of money.
So much money.
And I don't, that could be frustrating for someone on the outside, thinking, first of all, that I'll never get to that level because it's ingrained into whatever society has. And second of all, there's also a bunch of garbage going on associated with that culture.
Oh,
like
for sure.
The high levels of abuse and hazing and the injuries and traumas and death coming from that. that's her side. So I can see her side and her perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, I can see the perspective of a dad wanting the best for the kid and wanting to be connected in whatever pathway the kid wants to be in, and this being a way or a mom that you would encourage them to kind of find connections and make lasting relationships that will impact your career for years to come, because it makes a difference at work.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I don't know much about it, but it's just kind of a fascinating thing that I've kind of learned a little bit more about recently. Okay, I think the character we need to jump to is Trip.
Yeah, let's get to Trip.
Trip is fascinating to me.
Oh, really?
I just think he just seems like a puppy dog.
A puppy dog,
I know. But there's something he's hiding, and I don't know if it's because he is such a likable guy that you're like...
Well, let's talk about Trip.
Yeah.
So they go to Kappa Phi Omicron, the fraternity
that Jay was a part
Jay
of.
Kemp is part of. And the first person they meet at the door is Trip, and you can go ahead and tell us about it.
Oh, I don't know how much to tell, but just more that I think he's so interesting because he's this likable dude. He immediately you feel like he wants to be your best friend. He wants to help you however he can. He walks them through the halls of the fraternity, showing them the things. He shows them the wall of all the Capo Dream Girls, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then takes them upstairs to the bedroom. And I feel like he's mostly straightforward. You mostly get then every once in a while there'll be something that he kind of like his eyes shift or he kind of pauses before he just answers. So you get the feeling that's like maybe something's being hidden a little, but mostly he just wants to be helpful.
I see those times when his eyes shift and he pauses in response at times when they're pressing about Michael Williams specifically. So maybe it is him. Maybe Trip has something he's hiding, but when they talk about Michael, he'll like pause and be like, oh, well, he was doing this, or he was just trying to take care of the money or something like that.
Yeah.
So in defense of like he's being puppeted, he's not threatening at all. And so maybe that's the big surprise, is that he'll be a big...
Yes, that's what I keep wondering. If he's not threatening looking, but there's something he is hiding.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know.
But they see him, the detectives see him as a way to get information.
Yeah.
In fact, right away, Teddy's like, this kid wants to please, and let's take advantage of that. And so Teddy, with his magic power of just talking to people, gets a lot of information from Trip.
Yeah.
One of the bits of information they get is about Jay's roommate,
Yes.
Cade, and maybe we should talk about Cade now.
Yeah, Cade.
Cade, thank you.
Yeah, it's Cade. So Cade has moved out. What's interesting when they walk in the room is it looks almost too clean. They feel like certain things have been picked up, but it's still like a mess. Especially Jay's half of the room is just like clothes everywhere, bed unmade, stuff everywhere, whereas Cade's half of the room is very neat and tidy. Almost looks like nobody's been living there, which come to find out he hasn't been really living there for the last little while. He's been living with his girlfriend off campus because they end up visiting him and finding out that he's not pleased with what's happening. This is a weird part.
So weird.
But what Jay feels like as fraternity brothers, that they should be sharing girlfriends, which is just bizarre to me because he feels like if they're brothers, they should share everything. There shouldn't be anything. And it's more because... What were you going to say?
Oh, you go ahead and finish.
I feel like it's more because he's just like... I think he just likes girls. And he just wants everything. And it's very selfish and strange behavior.
It's funny because this is all I was going to say. Up to that point, Jay is the victim in my mind. And it's hard for me to see him as doing things wrong because he's just thought of as like the recipient of some bad action. It's probably the case all the time that, well, I won't say that. But we find out that Jay's maybe not innocent, right? So part of it is Jay's slobby. He loves to party. Comes up with this idea that at this fraternity we're going to share girls, and he's down with that. But But Cade's not. And that's why he
Yes.
goes and leaves.
And his girlfriend Samantha isn't, which I also get the sense that something happened with Samantha where either Jay made a move on her or some other frat brother did because of this rule, because she acts very strange. Not just like, oh, that was a weird idea, but she acts a little bit like hurt almost, like something happened to her. So that makes me feel sad for her.
It was super sad because she does not seem to like Jay at all. What's odd is it's only through those two that we hear this story of Jay trying to bring in other girls. When you go to, so what happens? Sorry, I got to back up. So Jay then, we find out, changes the rules. He falls for Katie. What's her last name? Coleman. She's a Kappa Dream girl, so she's like a hottie. And
supposedly falls for her.
He falls for her, and then that's when he changes his ideas. He's like, I'm not so down with this sharing thing because I really like Katie. But then you go and find out from Katie that they really weren't together, and you later on get into text messages, and even their text wouldn't suggest there's anything romantic or physically involved. So it makes you wonder.
Yes, what was really going on there?
And Samantha are talking about, is Jay really in a relationship, and is that something worth hiding, or are maybe Kate and Samantha taking them off course because they're the only two that support this idea of Jay wanting to share girls and then changing his mind once he got Katie, once he got involved with Katie. I'm talking possessive about women, which the author would not like at all. Jay does not get Katie. Katie and Jay probably going
just together.
So this is kind of a side thing, but do you guys feel like it's like going to become something that's like supernatural or something like that? Like, how the heck is his face the one that was in the car, but he's the one who got hit?
Yeah, isn't it funny? When we first talked about this, I was thinking of like a clone or some sort of...
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting too, because I've been waiting for that to happen, and then they were like, oh, they all dress the same. They're all like your vineyard vines, like khaki shorts, Sperry's, like... And so then they started...
Ken dolls all the time.
She called them Ken dolls. So then I started thinking, well, maybe it's just because they all do look so similar. But then when they actually go through the fraternity pictures of the guys, they're like, well, remember they call two guys in that look similar to him, and they end up being like not good leads at all. Like, I can't remember, but like totally there was no way that they were involved. And we should mention right now really quick that Michael did have an alibi. He was with a girl, and the girl backed up his alibi, and so did all the guys, because he came down the next morning with her. But anyway, so the guys that looked the most like Jay, ended up being non-leads. So it makes me wonder
what's going on.
What is going on? Like, at first I thought they would find.
Yeah. It's even interesting because like if someone's getting hit, all the witnesses that actually saw the face are like, oh yeah, it looked just like Jay. And like, you wouldn't really be saying that if it was like all the frat boys kind of look similar, and it's like, oh well, it could have been any of these guys. So like, like they had to have had a good look at this guy's face and were like,
and
Jay
going by at 45 miles an hour, how good of a look could you get?
It's true.
Yeah,
but it's just weird that everyone went to, it looks like Jay, when they just saw Jay got hit, right? So it's like, there's got to be something more behind that than...
Yeah, and the fact that he was smiling. Like, every eyewitness says he was smiling, and it looked just like him. So I agree, it could get supernatural.
There are a couple hints that I didn't even think about this sent out, but that might get supernatural. So, first of all, their memorial service, a little weird, right? So they, maybe not too weird, but they say they're going to have a funeral, and the detectives are like, well, won't the family have a funeral? And then Tripp's like, well, it'll just be a memorial service. So they come as detectives to this memorial service, and they're all in this room kind of gathered around, and most of them are sad and sobbing, but there's like a couple like weird smirks every once in a while.
Oh yeah, like some guy calls another guy.
Yeah,
calls him like a wimp, but the slang word for wimp.
That one word.
Yeah,
that one.
And there's the little snickering, and then Tripp reads this poem. I'm gonna read it. Is that all right?
Yeah, read it. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, I got it now.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, thanks.
If there's just like a specific part in it that you need to mention, you can just read that too. Because most people will have read the book with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like...
it's not even an awesome poem, but after the poem, then people kind of come together and they start to mourn again. Joyous his days of youth are glad, danced along a rosy garb beclad. The world was then so sweet, how kindly, how enchantingly smiled the future with what golden eye did life's paradise's moments greet, while the tear his mother's eyes escaped, under him the realm of shadows gaped, and the fates of his thread began to sever, earth and heaven then vanished from his sight, from the grave thoughts shrunk he in affright. Sweet the world is to the dying ever. So he Trip reads this poem, and then everyone's sort of like, I guess they remember there's actually a kid that died here, and they start to get solemn again.
Yeah.
So it's something little ceremonial, but not even as ceremony as later on when they're doing some vote for something. The procedure for voting requires them putting on these Guy Fawkes masks. So they all have like a mustache and this uniform mask and uniform robes. And the detectives walk in on this, trying to find, who are they looking for? Cade, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find Cade so they could question him further. And she's like, this is creepy. Like everyone's masked up and they all sort of look the same, sort of ceremonial. And the reasoning makes sense because they want to have anonymity in their vote. But yeah, just a little maybe
just creepy,
supernatural, or
yeah,
I don't know.
And then her dream at the end as well.
Yes.
Where she just starts speaking German all of a sudden, and she has no
so then
correlation with that.
she dreams that those guys in Guy Fawkes mask. So the story of Guy Fawkes, he was a guy that was going to blow up Parliament in, I think, London at some point, and put all this TNT, and they found him and then burned him as punishment. And that's the day to celebrate catching this Guy Fawkes before he blew people up. So she has a dream of all these boys playing with fire, like very boy thing to do, but destructive at the same time. And then she has the smell, a true acrid smell, wakes up and realizes she's
actually on fire.
And
her room's on fire.
And then learns that she speaks German.
Which is interesting because her mom is a German professor, but she always says, even though being around it, she never learned it. So there's something there that's like, oh, but subconsciously, you must have learned something.
Yeah.
The trauma brought it out.
She knows German, which is interesting.
But I feel like for this detective, it's going to get really hard for her if things get like weirdly supernatural or something. I feel like the way that she's wired, she relies, I mean, as much as she does rely off of emotion, I think she does it in a respectful manner and like that makes sense.
I agree.
I feel like it's going to be really weird for her if it's like,
because she's all about stats.
Yeah.
Like she's like stats or whatever it is she's worried
this
about.
Many people
like,
die, therefore it's bad.
Yes. So I agree. It would be tricky for her if that happens.
Yeah. That'll be interesting.
The other thing to note is that all the kids, when they witnessed this happen, it was not only I guess they didn't witness this, but as they talk about the case, they talk about how he didn't slow down. Whoever it was sped up. And usually with hit and runs, they realize at the last minute even they're about to hit something, or they stay the same speed even and just hit and then slow down, or, like kind of, but it was like sped up, kept going. And the other interesting thing we find out is whoever the person was driving Jay's car.
Yeah, good point.
And they don't know, her first thought was, well, maybe he lost it in a gambling thing, because that's very prevalent in these fraternities too, is gambling. So, I don't know. There's a lot there.
And I don't know if it's cheating to read the little blurbs on the back, but there's a lot of talk of like high society and the privileged, and like I just wonder if maybe it's not supernatural, but it's like people in power trying so hard to maintain their power and willing to, break laws and rules to do that.
Right.
Which is something we see throughout history. It doesn't matter what society you're dealing with. People with power want to keep their power. I mean, it's natural. If you have power, you're not going to want to relinquish it to somebody. Or if you have certain level of power, that you're going to want more power.
Yeah, those not in power, I am guilty of this too. I feel like, if I could just change this thing, then it's going to be fine. But then there's going to be an imbalance, and there's going to be a vacuum, and that will be occupied by someone that sees the opportunity and takes advantage of the power. And then once they have power, they have the same self-interest to maintain that power.
It's tricky. I know there's like
sad
no
part of
good
human
answers.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's true. If one person steps out of that power position, somebody else will step in. So I don't know. I feel like it's really been interesting up to this point. It's not been like, it's interesting when you think of everything we know, but it hasn't been just this like vortex of information really fast. And I think that's why I put it at a 5 out of 10 for me. It was slowly pulling this information and slowly getting her to like unpack things. So for me, I think that's why it's been slow. But when you think of all the things and everything going on, you're like, whoa, this is a really cool book. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot of characters here that we can learn and grow knowledge on them and figure out what's really going on in the end.
Yeah, I feel like any book I've read that started slow, I've just hated it for like the first maybe quarter of the book I've read. But anything after that, for the most part at least, especially with Brandon Sanderson books and how slow they move at the beginning, I just like love the books by the end.
Yeah.
It takes a while to lay the foundation.
It's worth it. You get more depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
All right, last predictions. I have my prediction. Who did it? Who done it?
Oh gosh, I don't even have a prediction yet. I don't feel like
I'll go first. So as she's laying there in bed, her last night of dreaming, before the fire starts, she talks about these boys. She thinks it's probably the boys. She calls them the brother or the brethren, and not the girls, not the sorority. And then she falls asleep, and then she's on fire. I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's the girls somehow involved. There's one little sentence as she's leaving the sorority. She looks up to kind of map out where Katie's room is, and there's this one glance of auburn hair that brushes past a window. I don't know why she would mention it. And she does have a lot of details, so maybe it's just a red herring, but I think there's a girl with auburn hair that's going to have a big role in.
I don't even know what color that is. What color is the auburn?
Red.
Okay.
Red hair.
Reddish brownish. I actually was going to say that I feel like they haven't quite figured out Katie yet. I don't know if it's her or not, but she was acting so weird. I mean, she hasn't left her bed for 3 days or whatever it's been.
Mourning a man she doesn't love.
And and then they say like the texts don't show that they love each other. She says they're not in a relationship, but she also won't talk when her sorority mom is around because they actually have like a mom living with them. And so something's up with her, even though I know, like you said, at the end of that last chapter when she was like, it's all part of the brotherhood. It can't be the sorority. I can rule that out. And then I feel like because Michael makes that really damning statement as he walks out of like, watch your back, and then all of a sudden her house is burning down, you automatically assume it's Michael. But it did leave me wondering. I hadn't thought the sorority necessarily yet, but I thought, I don't think it could be Michael unless it's him just being arrogant.
Or Michael's being nice and he's like, please watch your back.
Yeah. Could have been a public service announcement.
Yeah.
Could you please watch your back?
There's a spider on your back. Watch out.
I got it.
What are your last predictions, Jackson?
I don't know. Can I just make like the wackiest prediction possible?
Move on to supernatural.
All right. What if Jay hit himself and the guy Jay hit wasn't actually Jay? And it goes so high up that they were able to change the DNA files for Jay. I don't know. I'm saying I don't know. But no, my actual prediction is I think it's Trip. He's the one who originally introduced it. Like, he's like the first frat bro that they meet, right?
Yeah.
I think Trip is super sketch.
He's the last one that texted with him.
And he's the last guy texted. What was the text again? Do you guys remember?
It was like Michael, something about Mike.
Don't tell Mike.
Don't tell Mike. Yeah.
That's what it was.
But Mike ruled it out as, oh, well, this kid's just like, you know.
He's always hiding money.
Yeah.
Because Michael's the treasurer and Jay's always planning all these big parties and kind of hiding the money. And he also didn't want to pay his fines. Remember that?
Yeah. Jay doesn't seem like a very good guy.
Yeah.
But now he's dead, so may he rest in peace.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're about at time. Any last statements?
No, I think this has been fun, though. It's good to discuss the book. It's fun to have you guys along with us.
Yeah, it makes me think about things I wouldn't think about. It's nice. Next
Yeah.
time, hopefully something crazy happens. We're just gonna read all of part 2, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone read part 2.
Yep.
All right. So this may or may not work. Maybe not at all related, but I'm gonna just maybe leave with this one.
Go
thought.
for it.
Early on, she goes back to her house and she listens to some Dylan. She says, "I'm guessing Bob Dylan about another life." And there's a storm. There's a song called "Storm Shelter from the Storm," and the lyrics of that song read like this: "'Twas another lifetime, one of toil and blood, when the blackness was a virtue, when the road was full of mud. I came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form. Come in," she said, "I'll give you shelter from the storm." And it talks about a love lost where this man finds support in a woman, a shelter from the storm. But then he keeps coming back to her, shelter from the storm. Eventually, there's a breakup and she leaves. But he thinks of her as the shelter from the storm. And I wonder if it's foreshadowing of a woman that is sort of the
Yeah, interesting.
I like it. Okay.
extra with Bob Dylan.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace out.
Was that good?
I think so. I'm
A little
worried.
long.